All right, hi. Welcome to Beyond the Basics, Unlocking UEFN with an Unreal Mindset. My name is Stefan Rüb. I'm a freelance Unreal Engine and UEFN artist and developer, as well as a gold-level Unreal Authorized instructor. I've been working and training in various industries like manufacturing, automotive, animation, law enforcement, etc. I'm on YouTube, where I do tutorials, technical breakdowns, and other fun stuff. I'm also on LinkedIn, so let's connect if you want to work with me. And I'm kind of semi-active on Twitter or X with all things game dev, UEFN, Unreal Engine, etc. First, I'd like to show you a quick video of the UEFN project that this talk is mostly based on. So enjoy. This is Dragon Battle, Clash of the Elements, an interactive musical experience where you play as warriors of two rival kingdoms, fire and ice, fighting on the backs of giant dragons flying through the sky. You have to collect the enemy kingdom's element charts and bring them to the heart of elements on the center floating island. All of this is wrapped in a custom-composed soundtrack that reacts to the gameplay and tells the story as it's happening. I wanted to create a Fortnite project that is a bit outside of the norm, just to see what's possible. And it allowed me to dive deeper into UEFN, and it plays a bit to my strengths and knowledge, such as technical art, modeling, materials, effects, and music composition. This talk is about looking at UEFN from an Unreal Engine perspective. It's based on my experience from years of being a freelance or solo developer and creator, as well as teaching and mentoring people how to use Unreal Engine in various industries, and the common pitfalls and mistakes I've come across. Basically, things I wish I knew when I started. Don't sue me, Alex. Of course, I don't know everything, so take it all with a grain of salt. It's just my current state of knowledge. Who is this talk for? Hopefully for you. So on the one hand, it's Unreal Engine blueprint devs who are looking to make the switch to UEFN. And on the other hand, it's UEFN artists and developers who are looking to deepen their knowledge and improve their workflows. Quick look at the agenda. We'll start by taking a look under the hood and get some technical background and a general overview, so we're all on the same page. Then we'll move on to the mindset shift, how to work with UEFN and not against it. Next, it's power tools, tools to power your workflow, useful tools and features that you should use if you're not already using them, and what you can take over from Unreal Engine to UEFN. After that, it's modularity is magic, embracing the modular workflow that makes Unreal the powerhouse that it can be. And we'll finish it off with blueprints versus verse. If you come from Unreal Engine and have only been developing using blueprints, like myself, switching to UEFN with verse as a coding language can be daunting. But a visual scripting background can prepare you for verse, and that's what I want to talk about at the end. This talk is packed with content, so I gotta go fast, and I won't have time for Q&A, but I'll be around, so catch me if you can. By the end of this talk, you'll see which Unreal workflows transfer directly into UEFN. You'll know some of the most efficient ways to build custom content. You'll be able to design assets modularly, so they're fast to adapt and reuse. And hopefully, you'll no longer be scared by verse. If by the end of this talk, you think you've known all of this already, approach me and you receive a personal high five. Let's start by taking a look under the hood and get everybody on the same page. This is a default Unreal Engine project folder structure. And I'm not talking about the automatically generated folders like saved, intermediate, and derived data cache, but only the ones that you actually need, like the config folder, where we have the project, editor, and engine settings saved in .ini files. Don't touch those if you don't know what you're doing. Then we have the content folder with, of course, your project content inside. And optionally, we might have a plugins folder where we can see project-specific plugins. And I gotta start my timer here. And of course, we have the .uproject file as well. In UEFN, it looks a bit different. We have the .uefn project file and a plugins folder in the same folder. Beneath that is a My Project folder, so your project name, and then a content folder and a .u plugin file beneath that. And if you're now thinking, I've seen this one before. Ever created a content plugin in Unreal? Does that maybe ring a bell? For those of you who don't know, here's how you can create a content plugin. You just open the plugins window, click on Add, choose Content Only, type in name, project location, description, and stuff like that, and then create the plugin. From there, you can either use it as default project content, just access it from the content drawer, or you can pack the plugin using the Unreal Automation tool and then load it into an already packaged application, for example, as a DLC. No need to repackage the original application. So we can surmise from that a UEFN project is essentially a DLC for Fortnite, where Fortnite is the base game with the core functionality, and the custom islands just get downloaded when used. You can either use pre-compiled Fortnite content or custom content. We're essentially modding the metaverse. Let's take a closer look at the folders that are available to us. In our project, we have access to the content folder, where all of your project's content is divided into a hopefully clean folder structure, right? Then we have the Fortnite folder, where we have access to the Fortnite devices, prefabs, galleries, props, and so on. All of this content is pre-cooked, so it's not editable, but it's accessible, so you can use it in your level. And the Epic folder is essentially the same thing as the engine folder in the default Unreal editor, stuff that we need to make it all work. Here's what I do for a very basic content folder structure. I use short names, which are easily recognizable. I base them on the asset type, so it's BP for blueprint, materials, meshes, sequences, textures, and so on and so forth. And sometimes I do subfolders for specific purposes. If I feel really fancy, I color code them as well. If you don't know how to do this, you right-click on a folder, then select color. Then you have the awesome color picker and can choose any color of the rainbow. Click OK, and the color is set for that folder. Inside of these folders, we have assets. And here's an overview of the most basic asset types. We might have a level, which is also called a map. Inside of this level, there might be a floating island, a static mesh, that uses a material, this rock material, and this material uses a rock texture. Each asset type has a specific editor that we open up by double-clicking the asset in the content drawer. And when we double-click the static mesh, it opens the static mesh editor. If we double-click the material, it opens the material editor. If you double-click a level, it opens the level in the main editor, because the main editor is the editor for level assets. What about now reusing assets across projects? Don't copy files. Copying files is cringe. Almost as cringe as still using the old Unreal Engine logo in social posts or YouTube videos. Don't do it. Never copy a U asset or U map. This will not work, and here's why. I talked about the level and the dependencies here. So we have the level. It uses the static mesh, so it needs the static mesh to work. The static mesh needs the material to work, and the material needs the texture to work. This is called references, and you can check that with the so-called reference viewer. Just right-click on the asset. The solution for that is called content migration. So you right-click on an asset or a folder, choose Asset Actions, and then Migrate. Always migrate into the content folder of the new project, because all of the asset dependencies and references will be taken over with the folder structure automatically. Now I've talked a lot about assets. What about actors? We see this floating island twice here, and technically both of them are static meshes. But one of them is the static mesh asset, which contains the data about the geometry, UVs, materials, collision, and stuff. The other one is the static mesh actor, which is a specific actor type that can reference and display a static mesh asset. Every object in our level is an actor. Actors have settings and properties, and we can access them from the details panel. The details panel shows actor-specific settings. For a static mesh actor, it could be the static mesh, the material, some physics settings. For a light actor, it could be the light color, the light intensity, and no physics settings. The settings differ on the actor type, like I just said, and the values that you change can also be reset to the default values. This you can do with a little small back arrow to the side here. You can either show all properties of that asset, of that actor, or depending on a category with the buttons on top. You can also filter the properties by only the properties that you have already changed, that you have touched, or stuff that is keyable, so animatable in the sequencer. And you can add properties to favorites, right-click on the property, add to favorites, and then with a little star symbol on the top right, you can put them on top. The cool thing is, above all of the detailed settings, we have the component section. And there we can add components on a per instance level. Here's what you need to know about that. An actor is essentially a container. And the components inside give the container, the actor, the functionality. For example, static mesh component allows an actor to display a static mesh asset, have collisions and stuff like that. And if you understand that, you can do a lot of things with that. And even though scene graph is all the hype right now, this still exists and is still valid. For the actor structure in our level, we have the outliner, where we have a list of all actors in our level that we can search, we can sort, we can organize the actors into custom folders, and create hierarchies by attaching and detaching actors to one another. For the attachment and detachment, they need to have the same mobility. So static actors can be attached to movable actors. These are the basics. Let's go beyond. With the mindset shift, how to work with UEFN and not against it. Because Unreal Engine people might come into UEFN and try to work with it inefficiently because they're trying to first force all of their UE workflows in there. If you know how UEFN is supposed to be used from the Fortnite perspective, you can work better with it. Let's start with levels. You can work with multiple levels in your project just to try stuff out. But to playtest a level in the Fortnite session, you need to add it to the so-called game feature data. It's a data asset that comes with every project, and you can either do this manually, or it will prompt you to do this once you try to playtest a level. This is also where you set your default level, which is used for publishing. It is essentially similar to the maps and mode section in the project settings in the Unreal Editor. Then we have the island settings, which is an actor that's part of every level. There you can set up the game mode and type, like is it free for all, are there teams, then the player settings, how many players can play, the team sizes, where do the players get spawned, how can they move, and so much more. The game rules and round settings, how many rounds are there, what does it take for a game to end, as well as a lot of UI settings and so much more. This is basically a mix of world settings, game mode, player controller, HUD, player movement, and so much more, all wrapped into one actor. So obviously very important. With UEFN, we also get revision control for free with all of the server infrastructure all set up. You just have to click the little checkbox once you create a project. Then it's built into the editor. You can check in changes and revert to previous versions. And when you check in changes, you can add cool little comments like, I have changed the world. Just make it make sense. UEFN also comes with the Fortnite prop snapping, which you can use just with the translate snapping grid. Props will snap to other props' edges and also automatically rotate based on the context. This is similar to what we see in the Fortnite creative mode. This is perfect for this modular workflow that the Fortnite props are obviously built for, and you can use them in so many contexts. If you don't like the specific style, you can also adapt the style at least a bit by, for example, making it photoreal instead of stylized. And yes, I know we have photorealistic textures at home, Tim, for example, the Quixel Megascans. For prop customization, we can create a data asset and base it on the building texture data. Then, in there, we can either choose textures, like diffuse, normal, specular, which uses the default Fortnite material, or we can choose to override the material completely with our own material asset or material instance asset. To apply this then, you just select the relevant props and drag and drop the data asset into the designated slot. Plop, and there it is. What about game logic? Fortnite uses devices, which are building blocks for logic. Each device has a specific functionality. There's a button to press, there's a prop mover device to move props, and so on and so forth. Some of them can be interacted with, others control things. All of them need to exist in the level to work. The logic is done through direct event linking. And here I have a small example where if you press this button, it starts moving the prop mover device, which then starts moving the chair. Really fancy stuff. The linking is done through functions and events. Functions can be triggered by selecting other devices and their events, and events can be selected by other devices to trigger their functions. This is done in the details panel, which we already know, and you can see it here. You can think of them like blueprint classes with predefined functionality, exposed event dispatchers, and variables that someone has thankfully already prepared for your project. The connection is always shown on both devices, and the triggers can also be set to multiple sources. You can see it's an array type input. For prop interaction, some devices only interact with props, such as the prop mover device, as the name might suggest. If you want to use just the default Fortnite props that come in the Fortnite folder, you're fine. If you want to use your own custom content, you can create a prop from that. If it's a single static mesh, you right-click on it in the content drawer, convert to prop under scripted asset actions, or if it's multiple assets, you can create a blueprint actor, derive it from the building prop, for example, and add the assets as components. Now you might ask, but is this scalable? What if I want hundreds of these interactions? And I must say, device scalability is a bit tricky still, but 2 points on that. If you duplicate multiple devices that are linked together, the links will automatically get swapped to the new duplicates. You can see here the prop mover device is automatically linked to the button 2, which is the duplicate of button 1. And of course, you can expand the functionality through verse, for example, by adding tags and creating functionality for all devices with the tag, typecasting devices, and so much more. I hope we can see UEFN has its own flow, but what's still unreal about it? So we move on to power tools, Unreal workflows with real benefits. How much UE is still in UEFN? And what can we carry over? We start with the editor layout, because it's the same editor layout that we already know and love or hate, with the viewport, outliner, details panel, and the layout is made from individual panels that can be rearranged. We have 3 types of panels. There's a default panel that is just placed in any panel slot, and you can make use of tabs to quickly switch between them. Then there's a floating panel, which can be placed anywhere, even on a completely different screen, and I'll get back to that. And there's a docked panel that can be docked to the side and then toggled on or off. Here's a quick demo of that using the Place Actors panel. So you go to Window, Place Actors panel, and then you can just drag it around like a window. If you drag it on the tab, you can place it in one of the panel slots, and I can release it from there as well. Once I tab it on the side, right-click on the tab, I can dock it to the sidebar, and then I can toggle it on. Once you interact with something else, it just pops off, and I can also pin it so it stays open if I interact with something else. Very cool. And this, of course, lends itself to a multi-monitor workflow. So panels and windows can be on multiple displays, whatever fits your workflow, full-screen content browsers, multiple viewports, multiple content drawers, and of course, your asset editors. For your asset editors, I would also advise you to make use of tabs. You can tab your asset editors to the side of your level tab, and then quickly switch between them, which is a nice workflow, especially since we have the content drawer that can just pop up everywhere in UEFN. If you're really happy with your panel arrangement and your layout, you can also save this and then reuse it later if you have like one specific workflow that you want to quickly get back to. You can also export these layouts and then use them on other machines. And if you screwed something up completely, you can always load the default editor layout and it gets back to the basics. The viewport is also extremely powerful in UEFN. It has a lot of features. You can use the immersive view, which is the shortcut F11, to go full screen in your viewport and just focus on that, which is really immersive. And the viewport toolbar has a lot of settings. I want to go through some of the most important ones. So here's a quick video of that. We have the transform and snapping settings on the top left corner. And then under perspective, I can choose one of the orthographic views where we have access to a rough measuring tool of distances using the middle mouse button. Then I can also choose one of the pre-existing cameras in my level and switch to that. Or I can make use of bookmarks, where I can save a viewport location and quickly jump back to that. That's also possible with shortcuts. I just show it here in the windows. Then the game view toggles on or off all of the visual helper objects. And the view modes allow us to debug stuff. For example, we can show us the scene without lighting, only wireframe, only lighting, and so much more. Then we can also choose to show and hide specific things, such as all of the collisions for all objects in my level. Under Viewport and scalability, I can choose to preview my platform, like on a Switch or on mobile devices. Then I can scale the scalability of my viewport, turning off or on some effects. The material quality level uses the material quality switch. And we can also render the viewport at a lower resolution with the screen percentage and then scale it up. We can also turn on or off real time in our viewport, so all of the moving objects stop moving and don't cost us anything. Viewports can also be separated into multiple view panes. It goes like this. On the top right, you have some of the presets here, like side by side, top to bottom. And here you have two separate viewports. One of them can be orthographic, one of them can be perspective. And also, if you click on the little triangle here on top, you can see the viewport is also a panel. And you can have up to 4 viewports simultaneously on multiple screens. But attention, that can take a lot of performance because it renders your scene up to 4 times. When the sequencer is open, you can work with the viewport also very cool. With a second viewport view pane, for example. The video gets to that. Give me a sec. So the camera is controlled in the viewport from the sequencer with the camera cut track. If I separate the viewport now, I can tell one of those viewports to say, I don't want to be controlled by the camera with allow cinematic camera control turned off. And then if I go back into the cine camera, I see that one of the viewport is controlled by the camera, and the other one I can still roam around freely. Then there's also the cinematic viewport under perspective, which gives us playback controls right inside of the viewport and a lot of options to toggle on helper grids and save spaces. The high-resolution screenshot tool is also really cool. It saves our viewport as a PNG file, and it has a few settings. Under perspective, right at the bottom, you can use the screenshot size multiplier to scale the resolution. Don't overdo it, your GPU driver might crash. You can include the buffer visualization targets as separate files, like base color, scene depth, stuff like that. And you can also render out objects with an alpha channel. So for example, I use this dragon here, tell it to render in the custom depth path with the little checkbox in the details panel. And then in the high-resolution screenshot tool, use custom depth as mask. We see the green screen now happening. And if I click capture, it always shows me on the bottom right side where it's saved. If you click on this, it brings you to the folder in your Explorer. The content drawer also has a lot of superpowers. Let me share some of you with them. So we have the folders where we can add them to our favorites, which pops up on top of our main tree view on the left side of the content drawer. You just right-click on a folder, add to favorites, and you can quickly access them. Then you have the search bar where you can search for assets by name. And if you search there, it searches in all subfolders to the current one and automatically starts showing assets when you start typing. So it just starts filtering that down. Speaking of filters, we also can filter by asset type. So we can say all materials, all textures, and if the buttons on the side are not already there, you can use the little filter symbol and just add one of these toggle buttons. If you want to dive a bit deeper, use the advanced search syntax. You can use the search bar to search for assets by metadata, build search rules by using operators like equals, does not equal to, is bigger, smaller, and also combine multiple search queries. Here's a quick demo. For example, I can search for all meshes with a triangle count that's higher than 1500 for high poly meshes. Or I can search for meshes which, based on the number of UV channels, anything that does not have one UV channel, so 0 or 2 and above. Or the number of collision primitives, so do I have simple collision setup for that mesh? And I can also search for materials by material domain type, anything that's not a surface material, like UI materials, post-process materials, decals, and then combine this with the blend mode translucent. And if I want to save this now, I can click on a little plus sign, save as custom filter, give it a name, and of course a color. Of course it's pink. And if I create it now, it pops up as one of the toggleable buttons there on the top left. Awesome stuff, check that out. We also have access to most of the editor modes in the Unreal Editor that we already know and love, where the landscape mode is, of course, for building worlds. You can build landscapes by either sculpting them from scratch or importing a height map and then adapting it. The height map has to be up to 2033 by 2033 in resolution. That's the cap for Fortnite. And the Fortnite landscape material automatically adapts with cliffs and grass. Here's a quick demo of that. So you switch to the landscape mode on the top. Then you import from file, import your height map. You see a little preview there. And then you click on import. And there it goes. If you want to further refine it, you can do this with landscape layers. So you can individually sculpt on these layers and then blend the edits in and out, which gives you a lot of control. Use the sculpt tools however you choose. And if you want to control where grass, dirt, rock, or whatever is happening, use the paint tool with the landscape paint material layers. And you can just paint on top of the landscape. The foliage mode allows us to paint happy little trees. You can just paint static meshes on a landscape or other static meshes. And for that, you just drag and drop objects into the foliage section. Foliage mode, there's the foliage section. This also works for Fortnite foliage assets, by the way. It creates a foliage type. You can set up the settings such as density, radius, set your brush radius, and then just brush on the landscape. It's really quick. These are optimized instances, and you have full control of where your trees, plants, rocks, or whatever will be. For grass, this is typically handled in the landscape material using a so-called landscape grass type asset. The Fortnite material has this already. If you want to do your own, here's how you do it. Right-click in the content drawer and just search for landscape grass type. Inside of there, you can set up one or multiple static meshes and their settings such as density and stuff like that. Then in your landscape material, you need a landscape grass output. Input your landscape grass type asset there, and then just give in a mask. Here's just one, so it's everywhere. And if I apply this now, I have donuts everywhere, because why not? And I'm the donut guy now, Andrew. The modeling mode is insanely powerful. I've used it for most of the floating islands that you've seen in my level. And here's how I did this. I created a cylinder and warped it for the base shape. Then I duplicated it around for some of the bigger shapes and voxel wrapped it to create one continuous mesh. Afterwards, I used the sculpt tools to smooth it out and create the rough shapes and remeshed it for an even topology. Then I created UVs using the Auto UV tool to map textures to it. Afterwards, I created a weight map to be able to separate the top from the rest of the island, just painting it on top there. And then I used the displacement tool with a texture map, just Quixel mega scans, set up the UV scale, the displacement intensity, and with the weight map there, I can say, don't do it on top, just on the sides. And then once again with less intensity, but only on top. Then duplicate the asset to make a low poly version of it using the simplify tool, either percentage or a specific triangle count. Once that's done, I put them at the same location in the level to be able to bake them. First select the low poly version, then the high poly version, go to bake, choose what you want to bake, the high poly detail to the low poly. It gives you a preview, and with a bit of material magic, it can look like this. Cool. Time for a quick-fire round. So, UEFN peeps, if you want to create custom VFX, you have to learn Niagara and materials. Here are some of the VFX that I've built for Dragon Battle. For example, the element charts, the heart of elements with some fake parallax effects and animatable properties depending on what team has claimed it currently, and the home beacons where you can travel back to the back of your dragon. If you want to build custom UI, you have to learn UNG and materials. Here's the custom player stats and the scoreboard I've built. There are some more options that I show later. If you want to animate characters, learn control rig. I built a custom control rig for the dragon because I wanted to create all movements and animations inside of UEFN for that project, just to try it out. And I only created the controls what I needed for the movements I wanted to do, with some fake dynamics and stuff like that. If you want to create a custom visual look, learn post-process materials. It comes after the main render, and I did this for the ending cinematic, like the fire at the side, and then also the ending title screen, because why not? I have full control inside of my material and can choose whichever team wins to show what I want to show. If you want to control multiple visuals at once, use material parameter collections. Very powerful stuff. A lot of things react to music in Dragon Battle, because it's one of the main driving things, like various UI elements, the floating islands, and stuff like that. For that, I used a material parameter collection with a scalar parameter called beat, which is animated in a short sequence, just 0 to 1 and back to 0. That sequence is then triggered by a patchwork device on the beat, and then my materials can just use the parameter in whatever way I want. Scale up or down objects, make them brighter or darker. It's just a value, right? Very cool stuff. And last but not least, if you want to control everything over time, learn Sequencer, one of the most powerful tools out there. Here are a few examples of how I used it. Next slide. So I have this cinematic intro sequence where I use the fade track for the transitions of my little sequences. The fade track just blends your full screen to a color of your choice, and you can just keyframe when this should happen. And I used it very sneakily to hide my transitions. Next is the camera cut track to control the camera. You can use it just with a static camera to have like a static shot, or animated cameras. And what some people don't know is you can also blend the camera back to the gameplay camera from the cinematic camera. Looks like this. So I play here, and then it blends back to the editor camera. To do this, you right-click on the camera cut track and tell it that it can blend. Then you get a little curve at the end where you can control how long a transition takes. Very cool stuff. Data layers are very powerful to load in and out actors that you only use for certain specific things. Like, for example, for my cinematic intro, I don't need this stuff afterwards. So I loaded it out and loaded then in all of the gameplay stuff that I need afterwards. And in the sequencer, I can tell when this is supposed to happen exactly. And I did this once again very sneakily when the screen was black. Event tracks allow you to control Fortnite devices over time. So you can set a keyframe and say, turn on, turn off, do some specific thing at a specific point in time, whichever fits my storytelling needs. In this case, I used it for toggling on and off UI, or allowing the players to move or not. Yeah. This is an example from another Fortnite island I did, where you play rock, paper, scissors, and then giant robots fight based on that. So if you win with rock, the robot uses a punch. If you win with paper, you have a paper cut. And if you win with scissors, you have the stab. And yes, I do all of my own stunts. And for that, I use the time dilation track to control time for this slow motion effect. And you can hear it. You can also use audio tracks in Sequencer. You can also do like high speed instead of slow motion. All of the available asset types in UEFN use the same editor as in the default Unreal editor. Some of them come with limited functionality. Like Niagara, not all options are available. Like, unfortunately, no audio spectrum, which I'm very sad about. Material, not all functions are available, but I show you a way around that. And not all control rig options are available, like the physics stuff, rigid body, and stuff like that. And also, some asset types just aren't available at all, like PCG. And I'm sure somewhere Chris Murphy is really sad about that. So yes, not everything is available, but I've heard it said that good artists copy and great artists steal. So here's some resources for you. You don't have to start from scratch. Use the Unreal Engine learning and game samples, for example, the content example, which is just packed with stuff on how to do stuff in the Unreal Engine, and some can be adapted. The Matrix City with the awesome buildings, with the fake interior shader, just take a look at that. Then all of the epic free stuff on Fab. Either just migrate stuff over from that, or just learn from it. Just take a look at how this is built. This is another project I did called The Oasis. It's a custom Fortnite island where you can just sit back and listen to some music with your friends. Specifically my song Calm Down. And the environment is animated to the music. Part of that animation is that these ribbons flying around get colored from the bottom to the top. For that, I needed a box mask, which was not available. So here I visualized the box mask. So I just created a Unreal Engine project. And inside of there, I let it show me the engine folder. And then I searched for the box mask function, because it's just a function asset, copied it over to my content, and from there I could just migrate it over and use it in UEFN. Secret tip. Also, there's the third-person control rig from Manny, which is just insanely powerful. You see how much node there are, and I just didn't feel like creating it from scratch. So I migrated this over as well, because it also works for all of the Fortnite characters, and I used it for the characters sitting on the benches, some of the poses, some of the animations. The UI Material Lab, one of the greatest resources out there for materials. It's a collection of material functions and techniques with pre-made widgets as usage examples, and all of the materials are commented thoroughly. You can see some of this here. It's an invaluable resource for UI materials, but also FX materials, because I've used it for some of the action line backgrounds in my intro here. And a lot of other stuff, by the way. Unreal Engine knowledge applies to UEFN. And the cool thing is, a lot of Unreal Engine knowledge is already out there. It's on YouTube. It's on the Epic Developer Portal. It's in full-blown Unreal Engine courses. So even though you might be using UEFN and not Unreal, these resources can be valuable to you because some of the stuff might be applicable still. So just check it out. One of these knowledge tips is that modularity is magic. Build once, reuse multiple times. And we should really learn to recycle. We only have one planet. UEFN is built modular by design. Here's a few examples. We have materials with the instances and the material functions. We have Niagara with the systems, the emitters, and the modules. And we have widgets that can be part of other widgets, and sequences that can be part of other sequences. Here's some examples. For material functions, I just built a very simple material functions for UV controls like tiling, rotation, offset, and then just this material function asset, drag and drop it in the material, and it creates this node for me. Materials also can use parents and instances, where you build the material functionality once and then adapt it with parameters in instances. The functionality here is very simple, just textures for diffuse, normal, roughness, specular, metallic, and then parameters to adapt this with like the tiling, the saturation, and stuff like that. You work with material instances in the editor. You have easy access to all parameters because it's just a list. You only change the selected parameters with the little checkbox to the left side. And you have instant visual feedback in the viewport, which is just awesome. And the parameters are ordered alphabetically, and if you have set it up this way, separated into groups. And from that, you can have one master material and to build like infinite versions of that. One more cool thing is, you remember the material function? I have set up material parameters in that function as well. And every material instance that uses a material that's built on top of a material that uses that function can have access to these parameters as well. So it gets piped through. Here's a few tips for modular material mastery. Don't try to build a one-size-fits-all material. This can just get cumbersome over time and hard to manage. Make it generic but specific enough, so just find the right balance. Also, make use of parameter groups for a cleaner structure, and name your parameters consistently for your own sanity. Use switches to turn on or off functionality on a per instance basis, because it also then, if you turn off the switch in the material instance, it no longer shows the related parameters. So you can make it then smaller or more complex. You can also override material properties in the instance, which is cool, like the shading model, the blend mode, or if it's two-sided or not. Of course, this has shader permutation consequences, but let's not talk about that. Then make use of the default Fortnite or Epic textures that are part of the UEFN installation. So if you reuse your materials across projects, all of these resources are already part of your engine. And build material functions for commonly used functionality. Just reuse the stuff. And use material parameter collections for global control, like the one I showed earlier. Next is Niagara, where we have the Niagara system asset, which is the asset that you can drag and drop in a level, and it just works. And the Niagara emitters. The emitters can be part of a system. So a system is built from one or multiple emitters. But emitters can also be separate assets that you can then reuse across multiple Niagara system assets. Emitters cannot live in a level alone. They have to be part of a system. Niagara emitters are built in stages. We see emitter spawn, update, particle spawn, update. And these stages are made out of so-called modules. The modules just come with UEFN. So if you click plus, you have a library of available modules to you. But you can also create your own modules, either in a scratchpad, which is then part of the emitter asset, or as a separate module asset that you can then reuse in multiple emitters and then reuse in multiple systems. UI can also be modular. It also has to be modular because UEFN forces you to do that, because you have the UI settings, then you have some of the UI devices and stuff like that. So here's an example from Dragon Battle, where we have a custom scoreboard on top. Then we have on the bottom left the player stats, and we have maybe some quest info or mission prompts and messages. Here's how this is built. On the top, we see the scoreboard is built out of two separate things, two separate widgets. And these also use separate widgets altogether, which I'll get back to later. On the bottom left, we see the player stats, which is one widget for the health, shield, and stuff like that, and another widget which just shows if the player has collected an element chart and is trying to carry it to the heart of elements. And in the center on the bottom, it's a message widget that tells you what to do. In this case, take the shard to the heart of elements. Another widget asset. You can also work modularly with UI differently. In this case, I built the icon for the scoreboard, how many shards have been placed, once, because I wanted to have an animation when it's turned on. So when a shard is delivered, it goes ping, and then you have this animation. To not have to redo this multiple times, I built this as a separate asset, and then reused it multiple times in the scoreboard assets, and then connected it to the game logic via view bindings. Sequences can also use other sequences as part of themselves. And when you have sequences inside of sequences as either subsequences or shots, they automatically get played when the main sequence is played. You can also take that one step further. Once again, the rock, paper, scissors robots, they also play out your rock, paper, scissors moves. So at the start of the round, you decide if you choose rock, paper, or scissors, and then the robots play out your moves like this. And I have a sequence for each outcome per robot, then another sequence for the camera moves, and then it's selected through the gameplay and played by verse. So it's always 3 sequences played at the same time. That's also a modular workflow. I hope you can see from that real power comes when you build things modularly, and it's a one-time effort with infinite reusability and scalability. Let's finish it off with blueprints versus verse. Is the struggle real or unreal? I'm sorry, the jokes are not getting better. First, let's start. What are blueprints? Blueprints is the visual scripting system that's built into Unreal Engine. It's node-based, so no coding is required, which makes it very artist-friendly, and I love it. It's great for rapid prototyping and iteration. On the other hand, what's verse? Verse is a programming language designed specifically for UEFN. It should be easy to learn. It's built for gameplay logic and interactions and supports modular, reusable, and scalable systems. It also handles concurrency and complex game rules out of the box. Now you might ask yourself, well, what's the issue? A lot of UE artists can't code because you didn't have to code. Blueprints already gave you everything that you needed. No need to dive into C++. Full projects could be developed using only blueprints. And I'm still doing it today. But a visual scripting background can be an asset when starting to learn verse. Because if you do it right, blueprints train logical and object-oriented thinking. You can build modular and scalable systems that work the same way in verse. The biggest shift that you have to do is that you then have to work with code and syntax, but not the core concepts. So good blueprint habits can be the perfect preparation for verse. I have to preface the next part by saying I'm by no means a verse pro, but I just wanted to share my findings with you. So I built a very simple example of setting up the same functionality in blueprints and verse, just to show you the similarities. So here's the example verse script. It checks if a player enters or exits the danger zone, and then increments the score for the player who enters. It also keeps track of if a player is currently in the zone or not. Let's go through it. Verse and blueprints have variables and editables. Variables are essentially labeled data storages, and the variable type defines what type of data can be saved in there. Like logic or booleans can save, is it true or false? An integer is a whole number, a string is text, right? They can be read or written by functions in the script. And an editable is a variable that can be set on a per instance basis. In verse, it's noted by the add editable, and in blueprints, it's just a little eye symbol that's open. In verse, the editables are mostly used to connect verse devices to other objects in your level. Another similarity I found is that verse and blueprints can use event binding. Here we have something happening on begin in verse, which is essentially event begin play in blueprint. And I subscribe to the danger zone events if an agent enters the danger zone or exits the danger zone. And I then call the function that is in the parentheses at the end. In blueprints, I just use the bind event to agent enters and bind event to agent exits. And then the create event node just calls the function. Same thing, just looks a bit different. In Blueprint, I just built some event dispatchers for that. Here's how a function is built in verse and blueprints. Also a lot of similarities. Of course, first we have the function name, so the definition. Here I call it highway to the danger zone. And you see it in verse, it's the start of the function. And in blueprints, it's just on top of the function node. Then we might have some input data, which is optional. In this case, it's an agent in Fortnite, which is essentially a player. And it's mapped to a local variable that's accessible inside of the function. In this case, I've called it agent 007, just to make a different name. And you see it's in parentheses there after the name in verse. And in blueprints, it's just a variable setter with little v noting it as a local variable. Then some functions might have an output, depending on what function type it is. In this case, it's void, so nothing. And in blueprint, in the node, also nothing comes out of the right side. There would be coming something out of the right side if you had some like calculations and said, this is the result. I want to access the result. Then the actual functionality of the function. I set the agent in danger zone variable to true, because the agent enters the danger zone. And in verse, it just looks like this. And in blueprints, it's once again just a set variable node. Then the next part tells the scorekeeper to increment the score for the agent 007. So scorekeeper.increment, and then for whom? The agent. In blueprint, it's just the function node with the target, the scorekeeper, and agent 007 is the local variable that we can still access because we are still inside of the function. Very simple stuff, but I hope the core concept comes across. And with my blueprint background and this mindset and a lot of research, it allowed me to create custom collectibles like the element charts, logic for scoring and the game win, and a custom framework for my interactive musical storytelling system, which could have been a completely separate talk. So a lot of stuff here that's possible even if you're a no-coder like me. It's also never been easier to start with verse. You now have the Epic Developer Assistant who you can just ask, like, what does this do? What does this do? Please help me. And it just helps you. It's really cool. So hopefully you see, verse is not so bad. And maybe we'll even get visual verse in the future. I don't know. So yeah, instead of a recap and a conclusion, I've written a little song because I thought it was funny. Maybe it's also more memorable like this. So yeah, have fun.
Looking under the hood, I hope you understood. Knowing your technical foundation can be real good. I guess now you see it real clearly. Your UEFN project is a DLC. You've got to shift your mind, set your focus right. Don't you go in blind, or it'll be a fight. Snap those walls and force like modular slices. Logic on point, wide type 3 devices. Yeah, yeah. You gotta know, you gotta know. It can be so easy. Let Unreal's flow just guide the show. Work smart, not hard, believe me. Create your constant note, press 1 through 4. Press the end key, snap something to the floor. Parameters and groups can be a chore, but you need to instill this in your core. Use rewords where you can, that's for sure. And messy note spaghetti will be no more. Editing modes hold untapped power. Knowing how to use these can save you hours. Whether it's a tree or some little flower, one pro stroke and the forest towers. In your landscape material as if it was a cereal, can spawn grass like it's some kind of bacteria. Whoa! You gotta know, you gotta know. It can be so easy. Let Unreal's flow just guide the show. Work smart, not hard, believe me. In everything that you do, make sure one thing is true. Make the programs work for and not against you. Keep your folders as clean as the layout on your screen. Then create your scene like nothing we've ever seen. Blueprints versus verse, it's not as much a curse as it might seem at first. Different things but none are worse. Start simple then rehearse. Unlock the metaverse.
Thanks to Epic Games for inviting me. Let's do this again sometime. Thank you for coming. Hope you had a good time and wishing you a great rest of your fest.
In everything that you do, make sure one thing is true. Make the programs that for and not against you. Keep your folders as clean